This GST is from National Open University of Nigeria. My name is Dan Asukwo, your instructor. Are you writing any of the GSTs soon, or you want to improve your knowledge on philosophy and logic? If so, let us know on the comment section so that we can help you out. If you will need a summary of the book, let us know at the comment section. If you are a noun student or from any other universities, this will be very useful for you. Please do well to share it with others as well as on your study groups. Why not do well to subscribe, like, comment, and share for others too to benefit. Introduction to Philosophy and Logic. Module 1. An Overview of Philosophy. Unit 1. Definition and Scope of Philosophy. 1.0. Introduction. This study unit introduces you to the definition and scope of philosophy as a discipline. The unit will focus particularly on the controversial nature of the definition or conception of philosophy. It will consider both the layman and academics' conceptions and understandings of philosophy. 2.0. Intended Learning Outcomes, ILOs. By the end of this unit, you will be able to define philosophy as a discipline, discuss the views about the conception of philosophy. 3.0. Main Content. 3.1. What is philosophy? You need to know from the outset that the term philosophy lends itself to many interpretations. Thus, the answer to this three-word question is not as simple as it looks or sounds. And because of the critical nature of the discipline, no one philosopher can define philosophy in a way that will be acceptable to every philosopher. Unlike other disciplines such as economics, history, political science, biology, etc., where students can give a straightforward definition of their respective discipline, this is not possible with philosophy. There is no such thing as the exact or univocal definition of philosophy. What we have seen from history is that each philosopher defines philosophy from his or her perspective, or that each philosopher defines philosophy based on what he or she perceives as the central problems, or what we may call the subject matter of philosophy. Since there are many problems or issues that philosophy grapples with, there are many definitions of philosophy. This may be the reason why Bodunrin, 1981-12, advises a newcomer into philosopher who wishes to define or know the meaning of philosophy to always wait for one, as he would have to settle for one or achieve this by himself or herself later in the cause of his or her studying philosophy. Sometimes it is often argued that you define philosophy by doing philosophy. Although this approach may not be correct, because it is not in all cases that you need to practice something before you explain or understand it. For instance, someone interested in the definition of death does not necessarily need to die before he explains or understands it. If he is told that the only way to define death is to die first, he is likely to give up the attempt. Even if the best way to define philosophy is to expose you to the rigors of deep philosophizing, this remains partial. What you should always have in mind is that when a student of philosophy asks a question, "What is philosophy?" he has started philosophizing, and to philosophize is to wonder about life and about the fundamental issues that borders on human existence. 3.2. The various conceptions of philosophy. The problem with the definition of philosophy also arises due to the various conceptions and misconceptions, understanding and misunderstanding of philosophy. Because of this, the discipline has been given various meanings or definitions. This section focuses on the different conceptions or definitions of the discipline from various groups or individuals' perspective. This begins from professionals to the layman and by layman, I mean the average man in the street. 2.1. Underlaborer conception. This is in another word called the popular conception of philosophy. In this sense, the word philosophy is often used to characterize a person or a group of persons' attitude to life. Attitude here means the general pattern or the habitual way of response of the person to events. Also, attitude, in a more developed sense, characterizes a person's expressed or observed worldview, which may be the sum of his assumptions, beliefs, attitudes, and prejudices, which are partly inherited and partly acquired in the process of living. Ekinpolu, 1981-2. In this sense, everybody is a philosopher insofar as everybody has a philosophy of life, that is, an attitude towards life. When we claim to have a personal philosophy of life, it refers to either or both two senses that we sometimes refer. Thus, why in the street you often heard people saying, "my philosophy," "his philosophy," and so on. If you ask a common man, "What is your philosophy of life?" you will get answers such as, "My philosophy of life is to take things gently," or you can see here that when we talk of a layman's conception of philosophy, it simply means the sum of a person's beliefs, the main principles that control and guide a person's life. This view also suggests that at least most human adults have necessarily some philosophy of life, since it would be impossible to lead a human life without some forms of beliefs and definite principles to guide those beliefs. These includes, among others, various ideas about man and the supernatural realities, such as God's soul, spirits which governs human life and worldview. In Halverson view, this impression of philosophy is understood to have a very practical orientation. And a philosophy of life include views on such things as the nature of man and man's place in the universe, some convictions about what things are worth for, and so on. 1967-4. In this conception, the term philosophy also refers to the profound sayings of the elders which are witty and pregnant with meanings. It is underlaborer because it does not capture the sense in which philosophy is understood, technically speaking. You must also know that this conception of philosophy also includes what can be regarded as the principle or ideology of an organization, group or government, or the ways of running an institution or organization. Hence, we talk of the philosophy of National Open University of Nigeria, noun. And people sometimes says, "No one understands the philosophy of this government," or "the party lacks any philosophical basis." 3. 2.2. The master scientist conception of philosophy. This conception of philosophy is itself the result of philosophical doctrine that sees knowledge as exclusively depending on sense experience. Whatever cannot be observed or is not subject to objective verification cannot constitute knowledge. In more recent times, this philosophical doctrine has come to be known as scientism. This conception repudiates knowledge that is not based on scientific method of inquiry. This impression or conception extols the sciences and treats the humanities like a vast debating society or subject meant for those without serious academics or professional ambition. This conception is further a product of a lopsided view of technology. Most people tend to ascribe the credit for technological achievements to the physical sciences, whereas in fact technological progress is due to a combination of many aspects of human life, including politics, law, education, art, commerce, and philosophy. Lack of appreciation for this, according to Onigbinde, 1999-20, has made many to assume that only science, and no other field, can yield knowledge and understanding. However, the implications and the inadequacies of this conception is not far-fetched. The implication of restricting human knowledge to human experience is half-knowledge or lopsided knowledge. Reality goes beyond experimental and observable. This explains why the empirical disciplines cannot answer the question of purpose, why the universe exists in the first place. It is incompetent to explain the ultimate purpose of our existence or of the universe because of its empirical constraints. But to argue that such questions cannot be fruitfully investigated because they fall outside the ambits of the empirical sciences is sheer intellectual dishonesty. Therefore, for us to have a more comprehensive and all-embracing conception of philosophy, we cannot afford to cage ourselves within the limited walls of experience and observables. 3. 2.3. Clarification of concepts. In this conception, philosophy is reduced to the role of clarification of the meaning of words and concepts. When we use such words like justice, good, bad, beauty, ugliness, what do we mean? To the advocates of this conception, the function of philosophy is to clarify the meaning of such words. To them, philosophy is a specialized field, serving the sciences and aiding in the clarification of language, rather than a broad field reflecting upon all of life's experiences. Harold, 1964-9. Certainly, this is one function of philosophy and not the main task or the only legitimate function of philosophy. To see it as the only legitimate function of philosophy is to have a narrow conception of philosophy, and therefore of knowledge. This is because it would limit what we call knowledge to statements about observable facts and their interrelations, that is, to the business of the various sciences. But we know that knowledge generally used is not the prerogative of the sciences. We know and do have knowledge of ethical and theological principles and other value-laden theories. However, other connotations of philosophy have been noted. In this vein, philosophy has been variously conceived to be the love for wisdom, the search for truth, the rational explanation of nature, the search for the ideal life, the concern with human experience and the reminder of familiar facts of everyday experience. 2.4. Philosophy as the love of wisdom. This connotation of philosophy is derived from the etymological meaning of philosophy. Etymologically, the word philosophy comes from the Greek words philos, philia, philion, which means friend, love, to love, and sophia, which means wisdom. Philia refers to such concepts as friendliness, affection, or any such concept conducive to the establishment of friendship between persons. On the other hand, Sophia, as understood by Aristotle, refers to the highest intellectual and especially philosophical excellence of which the human mind is capable, and which is the result of studying nature for its own sake. In this sense, it is translated theoretical wisdom. Onyeocha, 1996, 8. Wisdom consists in the constant and unwavering disposition to seek the truth. Philosophy includes both the seeking of wisdom and the wisdom that is sought. However, wisdom as used here is different from, though not opposed to, knowledge in the sense of amassed information. This is because one could be wise without having much knowledge, just as one could have a lot of knowledge without being wise. Wisdom in the philosophical sense is a habit of applying the intellect in a systematic way as a guide and a beacon in one's activities. It is more a matter of temperament and character than of knowledge. Ibid 11. In this connotation, the distinguishing mark of the philosopher that is friend or lover of wisdom is the premium he or she places on the application of the intellect at both the practical and theoretical levels of operation. A philosopher in this connotation is therefore one who believes in the efficacy of intellectual effort and who uses whatever knowledge he or she can command to benefit mankind. Socrates, in his conversation with Phaedrus, gives his criteria for ascribing wisdom to anyone, namely an originality of thought and a critical mind even about his or her own production. He says, if the work had been done with knowledge of the truth, if he could defend his statements when challenged and would demonstrate the inferiority of his own writings out of his own mouth, would be called not wise, for that pertains to a god but a lover of wisdom. Phaedrus 278d. In the Phaedrus, Socrates goes further to contrast true lovers of wisdom to those who merely parade themselves as lovers of wisdom when in actual fact they are mere lovers of words. He calls them copyists and writers of certain types of poetry. The type of poetry that Socrates disparages here is the type that manifests neither a profundity of thought nor a depth of content. Socrates also excludes from the realm of true philosophers certain types of law writers and speech writers who, in his words, have no other input than the juxtaposition and rearrangement of words and phrases in existing works. He calls them those who have nothing to show off more value than the literary works on whose phrase they spend hours twisting them this way and that, pasting them together and pulling them apart. Phaedrus 278d. 2.5. Philosophy as the search for truth. There is no gainsaying the fact that philosophy and indeed philosophers have a penchant for certain and indubitable knowledge. When René Descartes, a mathematician turned philosopher, declared his interest in philosophy, he was looking for a certain and distinct knowledge that can be certain and distinct as mathematical truths are. The philosopher shuns the mundane and the bizarre affairs of life and goes for the fundamental, the originality, the unstuffy of all there is wherein the truth of reality lies. The philosopher's penchant for the truth is best seen in the description of the philosopher as given by the Greek thinker and mathematician Pythagoras, c. 600 BC, when he likened philosophers to spectators at the ancient games. In the order of importance, the philosophers whom he compared with the spectators whose sole interest is the game itself are superior to competitors who are out to win prizes and commercials, who were out to make money from sales. Pythagoras had described himself as one who regards every aspect of reality with thoughtful attention for achieving a clearer, distinct, and more comprehensive understanding. Therefore, when Leon, the tyrant of Phlius, asked him who he was, Pythagoras replied, "A philosopher," and went on to compare life to the great games, where some went to compete for the great games, where some went to compete for the prizes and others went with wares to sell. In his assessment, the best among them all were those who went as spectators, since their interest in the games is simply to relax and enjoy it, and get the first-hand information, the nitty-gritty of the game. He compared the situation with the situation in real life, where some grow up with servile natures, and others are greedy for fame and gain. Unlike both classes of people, the philosopher seeks for truth. Laertius, 1925-11. The philosopher's superiority over these other classes of people lies in his constant disposition to spurn fame and profit and go for the truth. 4.0. Conclusion. Philosophy consists in the constant and unwavering disposition to seek the truth. In the light of this, Plato defines philosophy as a man whose passion is to seek the truth, a man whose heart is fixed on reality. According to Aristotle, philosophy is rightly called the knowledge of the truth. It is not out of place, therefore, to say that philosophy is synonymous with truth. Be that as it may, given the various conceptions of philosophy as outlined above, we submit with Omorigbe that philosophy is a rational search for answers to the questions that arise in the mind when we reflect on human experience. It is also a rational search for answers to the basic questions about the ultimate meaning of reality and of human life. Unit 2. Methods of Philosophy. 1.0. Introduction. By method here we refer to the way by which the act of philosophy can be carried out. Thus, in this unit you shall be examining the various ways by which philosophical processes have been carried out from the time of Socrates. 2.0. Intended Learning Outcomes, ILOs. By the end of this unit you will be able to explain the various methods in philosophy, demonstrate philosophical skills in evaluating how philosophers carry out philosophical activities. 3.0. Main content. 3.1. Socratic method. The Socratic method of philosophical consists in arguing out the entire process of the subject in question, in the manner of a dialogue. The prima facie view is refuted by exposing the inconsistencies and contradictions involved in accepting it as true. The teacher professes entire ignorance all the while, finally getting the truth from the mouth of the questioner himself, by the ingenious method of subtle examination, through the process of questioning and analysis. This technique of argument is based on a complete knowledge of the fundamental component elements of the subject of the argument and their relation to the constitution and condition of the intellect and reason of the opposite party concerned in the discussion. The Socratic method can be summed up in the following processes. 1. The assumption of an ignorance of truth by the teacher, which has been called the Socratic irony. This attitude of intellectual humility and basing oneself on the most fundamental of propositions in an argument is, as with Descartes, essential to unravel the depths of truth. 2. The method of dialogue or conversation as an effective technique in the discovery of truth. This is based on a grasp of the presence of the knowledge of the true and the good in every person at the bottom of his being, in spite of hasty conclusions that one may make regarding things due to immature observations and pet prejudices. This common ground of truth among men can be brought out to the surface by careful analysis, argument, and investigation, by question and answer. This is often called the art of philosophic midwifery. 3. The establishment of correct concepts or definitions before trying to know their application in life's instances. 4. The art of proceeding from the observed facts to more general truths, that is, adopting the inductive method of reasoning. The method of Socrates is also deductive in the sense that it draws out the consequences and implications of certain concepts and judges their validity. 3.2. Synthetic dialectic method of Plato. The analytical method of Socrates was followed by the synthetic dialectic of Plato, which concerned itself with discovering the causal relation between thought and being. Plato's dialectic method mostly consisted in the grouping of scattered particulars into a single concept or idea, and the dissection of this concept or idea into classes, that is, the generalization and arrangement of the idea. The arriving at a fact depends on the establishment of a correct concept or notion or principle. It is not possible to know, for example, what the true is or who a good man is, unless we first settle in our knowledge the nature of truth and goodness. 3.3. Pragmatic Method. According to the pragmatic method, everything is real when it tends to fruitful activity and results. The character of fulfilling the primal interests of man should be the guiding principle in philosophy. Human interest is the touchstone of philosophical endeavor, of all activity, physical, mental, moral, or spiritual. Values are to be judged by results, and the test of truth is workability. 3.4. Skepticism. Philosophy is said to have begun with wonder. The marvel of creation evokes the admiration of man, and its mysteriousness excites his wonder. And this wonder naturally leads to a serious inquiry into the nature of things. Given this, man became curious to know the truth behind the interesting wonder of the world. He investigates, speculates, argues, and discusses, and comes to a settled opinion of the nature of things in this wonderful world. This becomes his philosophy. Modern man, however, seems to have stepped into the region of philosophy through doubt and skeptical thinking. Man commenced doubting the validity of authority and dogma no less than that of accepted traditional beliefs. Descartes readily comes to mind in this form of method. Descartes started with doubting everything, even the validity of thought itself. Later, Kant too followed the critical method of inquiry in philosophy. Bradley was of the opinion that the chief need of philosophy is a skeptical study of first principles. However, he adds, by skepticism is not meant doubt about or disbelief in some tenet or tenets. It is an attempt to become aware and to doubt all preconceptions, and the essence is to ensure certainty in the process. 3.5. Empiricism and Rationalism. Empiricism as a method of philosophy is mainly confined to sense experience. It urges that all knowledge obtained by the senses is of what is already existent outside themselves, and that reason has its function in carefully judging the nature of the perceptive material provided to it by the senses. The laws of reason, according to empiricism, are copies of and controlled by knowledge which is posteriori. No a priori knowledge in the sense of what rationalism contends to be present in reason is ever possible. Rational concepts are byproducts of the experiential material. The source of knowledge is sense experience and not mind or reason. The method of acquiring knowledge is inductive. Ideas are reducible to sensations. Knowledge cannot be gained by merely finding that the opposite, which is inconceivable, as rationalism holds. And truth cannot be established by the fact that to deny it implies, somehow, its reaffirmation. A priori knowledge independent of sense experience is inconceivable. There are therefore no universal and necessary self-evident truths that are adumbrated by rationalism. So goes the bold empiricism. However, you need to know that this method has a defect. The defect of empiricism lies in the fact that the senses are untrustworthy as means of right knowledge. Therefore, we talk about appearance and reality in philosophy. The point is that things are sometimes not the way they appear to us. Sense precepts have being or reality only in relation to the constitutions of the respective senses, and never independently. The method of rationalism takes reason to be the sole means of acquiring philosophical knowledge. According to it, the objective universe is known, arranged, and controlled by the a priori laws of reason. The universe is considered an expression of the innate rational nature of the knowing subject. The criterion of truth is not sensory, but intellectual, rational, and deductive. This form of method is the mathematical methods. True knowledge is a priori, and is independent of sense experience. This knowledge is self-evident, and so it implies universal and necessary truths. But the point against this position is that rationalism taken exclusively cannot escape the charge of being non-critical regarding its own position. How can the rationalist be sure that what he knows through his rational powers is uncontradicted knowledge? 3.6. Kant's critical transcendental method. The critical or transcendental method of philosophy employed by Kant takes stock of the arguments of empiricism and rationalism, and builds a new system of tremendous importance in the history of philosophic thought. Kant follows the method of the analysis of the conditions and limits of knowledge. He points out that, though the material of our knowledge is supplied by the senses, the universality and the necessity about it comes from the very nature and constitution of the understanding, which is the knower of all things in the world. But the world which we thus know through synthetic a priori knowledge is not the real world, for it is built by the materials supplied by the senses, which gain the characters of universality and necessity when they are brought into shape by the categories provided by the understanding. The world of reality cannot be known by the powers that man possesses at present. If we had been endowed with a consciousness in general or an intellectual intuition uninfluenced by the judgments and categories of the understanding, it would have been possible for us to know the reality as such. But as this kind of consciousness is not possessed by us, we cannot know reality. What we know are just empirical facts or phenomena constructed by precepts and concepts common to all men. The postulates of reality that reason advances are only necessities felt by it and not realities in themselves. 3.7. Dialectical Method of Hegel. Kant's critical method was taken much further and completed by Hegel in a staggering system of idealism built by means of what he termed the dialectical method. This method of Hegel consists in the constructive dialectical process of opposition and reconciliation. Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis are its moments. The existence of the finite and its assertion of itself as such is the thesis. This thesis naturally evokes the existence and assertion of the finite that is its opposite. This is its antithesis. The relation between the thesis and the antithesis implies a reconciliation of these two in a higher synthesis brought about by the evolving force of the whole, which transcends the isolated factors of the existence and the assertion of the thesis and the antithesis. This reconciliation results in the cooperation of the thesis and the antithesis, and in a blend of the existence and the assertion of the unity of the synthesis. Then this synthesis itself becomes a thesis to which there is an antithesis. The two again get unified and transcended in a still higher synthesis. This process of dialectical unification in higher and higher syntheses continues in various grades, progressively, until the absolute is reached, where all contradiction is finally and fully reconciled. 4.0. Conclusion. The true philosophic method should not be lopsided, should not be biased to any or special dogma, but comprehend within itself the processes of reflection and speculation, and at the same time be able to reconcile the deductive and the inductive methods of reasoning. Unit 3, Branches of Philosophy, 1.0. Introduction. This study introduces you to the major branches of philosophy. It is an opportunity for you to know the divisions and subdivisions within philosophy. 2.0. Intended Learning Outcomes, ILOs. By the end of this unit, you will be able to classify philosophy, differentiate the different branches of philosophy. 3.0. Main content. 3.1. Logic. You should always remember that whenever you asked, "What is logic?" it does not have a straightforward answer, which means no straightforward answer can be given to that question. Logic has been variously defined by different scholars. Coppi, for instance, defines logic as the study of the methods and principles used in distinguishing good, correct, from bad, incorrect reasoning. 1972. On the other hand, Nancy sees logic as the science that appraises reasoning as correct or incorrect. 1990-34. Kahane, on his part, defines logic as an attempt to distinguish between correct, valid, and incorrect, invalid arguments. 1968-2. According to Di Poirelli, 1999-12, logic is that branch of philosophy that deals with the structure and principles of reasoning or sound argument. To Aid Ali, 2003-5, logic is a reflective study that provides the canons for judging and evaluation of correct reasoning. It is also the study of the principles of reasoning, especially of the structure of proposition, as distinguished from their content and of method and validity in deductive reasoning. What is common to all the above and other? Definitions of logic is that logic is not a clever way of dogging issues using a cunning means, but rather it is a systematic expository study of how human beings ought to think if they are to reason correctly. It is the study of how to ensure that your reasoning conforms to fundamental principles that governs correct reasoning. Etymologically, logic as a discipline derives from the Greek word logos, which means reasoned discourse. Its fundamental meaning is speech or statement in the sense that each speech or statement consists of coherent and rational arrangement of words. It is a tool for valid reasoning, an essential weapon for philosophical reflection, and for the separation of correct reasoning from the incorrect reasoning. You need to know that logic is an instrumental branch of philosophy. In point of fact, always remember that logic is the tool of philosophizing. Logic enables philosophers to make their arguments well-stated and persuasive more than other people do. It also enables philosophers to make their position clear, well-articulated, and to properly back up their pronouncements rational, their reasoning precise, cogent, and coherent. The logician is most concerned with argument which can be described as a string of statement that can simply be divided into two parts, namely premises and conclusion. The premise is also known as reason or reasons for the conclusion, while the conclusion is the claim that has been supported by the reasons. Before we go further, you must note that there are two forms of argument. They are simple argument and complex argument. A simple argument is one that contains one, two, or three ideas. Normally, such arguments consist of two or three statements as premises with another sentence as conclusion. Example: 1. Only students of National Open University of Nigeria study GST 203. Ambali studies GST 203. Therefore, Ambali is a student of National Open University of Nigeria too. All metals conduct electricity. Copper is a metal. Consequently, copper conducts electricity. You will observe from each of the above arguments, the claim conclusion is inferred, follow from one or more of the premises. And in each case there is a logical connection between the premises and the conclusion. The second argument is a complex argument. This form of argument consists of as many arguments as possible with so many premises and conclusions. Complex argument could take various patterns like seminar paper, debate, a write-up. Structurally, a complex argument normally has a theme with so many premises and conclusions. Example: there are two ways of dealing with criminals. Either rehabilitate them or punish them. Rehabilitation is not a viable option for the following reasons. 1. The cost of rehabilitation has skyrocketed. 2. Rehabilitation is not effective. It does not deter criminals or would-be criminals. 3. There are conflicting methods of rehabilitation. 4. Prisoners seem to be getting too good a lifestyle for what they have done. I suggest, therefore, that we should use the other option, that is, punish them. Acolyte, 2010-18. From this example, you will notice that identifying a complex argument involves a complex reasoning. But you will notice the following when you compare it with the simple sentence that you have read earlier. 1. It has very many major claims premises. 2. It has many premises supporting each or some of the major premises. 3. It has major conclusion, that is, major theme or position being defended. 4. It has additional supporting claims or auxiliary evidences for the position being defended. What you learn from the above, and which you must always remember, is that any argument must have premises and conclusion. For your argument to be good or correct, your premise must provide support to the conclusion, and the conclusion of any argument must follow or be inferred from the premises. When we talk of argument in philosophy, there are basically two types of argument, and these are deductive argument and inductive argument. So, in a way, we can say that logic is the study of the criteria of differentiating correct from incorrect arguments. In logic, an argument is deductive when the conclusion follows from its premises with absolute necessity or certainty. Deduction is the process of moving from the general to the specific. In other words, in logic, we deduce when we move from a proposition describing a condition that holds in all instances to an instance. The above examples are examples of deductive arguments. However, inductive arguments are those in which the premises do not lead to the conclusion with certainty. Induction is based on probability. For instance, when you say, Most noun student are dark in complexion. Yisa is a noun student. Therefore, Yisa is dark in complexion. Here the word most does not entail all the noun students. Therefore, one cannot conclude with certainty that Yisa is dark in complexion. Yisa could be among the few noun students that is not dark in complexion. You can see that there is no necessity in this conclusion. Probability is what characterizes it. 3.2 Epistemology. Epistemology is also one of the traditional branches of philosophy. Etymologically, it derives from two Greek words, episteme, which means knowledge, and logos, which means science of study, discourse, or reasoning. Put together, epistemology is the study or the science of knowledge. It is the branch of philosophy which investigates the scope, source, and limitations of human knowledge. In this branch of philosophy, the philosopher wishes to know what knowledge means. Is knowledge different from opinion and belief? Thus, epistemology tries to discover what knowledge is and how it differs from mere opinion or belief. It examines what constitutes belief and what constitutes knowledge. How does knowledge differ from belief? What does it mean to know, and how do humans know what they claim to know? What can we know? Can we know anything with certainty, or must we be certified with mere guess and opinion? Is there any limit to what we can know? What is the relation between knowledge and reality? Does all knowledge of the real world arise out of experience, or do we have knowledge that is in some degree independent of experience? You must know that the recent trends in epistemological discourse have left these traditional problems of epistemology to the problem of epistemological justification. Hence, the question now borders on, how do we justify our claim to knowledge? There are, however, some schools of thoughts in epistemology that you must know. The two schools that will be mentioned here, among others, are the skeptics and the foundationalists. The skeptics deny our ability to know anything for certain, while the foundationalists believe on certain foundation upon which the superstructure of knowledge can be built. 3.3 Metaphysics. This has been defined as the science of being as being. Being qua tale. This is the branch of philosophy that studies reality in its most comprehensive scope and fundamental principles. It is the science that tries to determine the real nature of things. For Plato, it is the knowledge of the suprasensible, therefore real being existent in the ideal world, and therefore explanatory of the realities of this transient world. According to Aristotle, all other disciplines study aspects of reality or being, but none of them concerns itself with the study of being as such. Mann, 1966, 18. However, there must be a science of being, a science of the first things or of the most real. Mann, 1966, 16. Indeed, the science of being would be the most basic, for in a sense all other special sciences presupposed it. Mann, 1966, 16. That science, according to Aristotle, is metaphysics. In his view, metaphysics studies the totality of things in the universe, both the possible and the real, the visible and the invisible. Metaphysics is a general study of existence and reality. For René Descartes, it is the knowledge of things which lies beyond this sense experience. While for Thomas Aquinas, it is the ultimate explanation of the mystery of being visible and invisible, in the ultimate being, causal and final, which is God. The word metaphysics is derived from the Greek word metaphysica, which means after the physics. The word first used by Andronicus of Rhodes, around 70 BC, a commentator on Aristotle's works. He used the term to describe Aristotle's works which came after the discussions on the physical sciences. It was recorded that Aristotle wrote a series of books dealing with nature which he himself called the Physics. However, decades after Aristotle's death, Andronicus decided to sort through his works and gave them titles. When Andronicus reached the batch of writings that followed the Physics, he did not know what to call them, so he invented a word, metaphysics. This means that the Greek word meta, after, also means beyond. In this sense, metaphysics means that which is beyond the physical eye. It discusses such problems as the problem of substance, appearance and reality, essence and existence, free will and determinism, human destiny, and many more. Various questions that are generated by metaphysicians includes the following among other ones. Why something instead of nothing? Is reality one or many? Is the universe self-caused, or does it involve the concept of a creator? What is the transcendent origin and foundation of this existence? Is reality essentially spiritual or material? Do persons have minds distinct from their bodies? What is mind? Is it a series of experiences? What is matter? Which is primary? What are their relationships? Are men free? Does God exist? What is the divine? If you look deep into these questions, you will discover that the answers lie beyond the boundaries of our experience. This simply means that the criterion for settling such question is not empirical possibility, but freedom from logical contradiction. You should also bear in mind that even if Aristotle is considered as the founding father of metaphysics as a science of reality, he was not the first to raise metaphysical problems. Metaphysics as an intellectual enterprise dates back to the pre-Socratic philosophers such as Thales, Anaximander, Anaximenes, as well as Pythagoras, Parmenides, and Heraclitus. The concern of these philosophers was the search for the primary stuff of the universe. They were also concerned with determining the ultimate constitutive elements and grounds for the unity of things. 3.4. Ethics. Ethics is mostly known as the branch of philosophy which deals with the morality of human actions in society. Omeregba, 1989, 2. Etymologically, ethics derive from the Greek word ethos, which means custom or character. It is a customary or acceptable way of acting. It is the philosophy of the morality of human conduct. Sometimes it is called moral philosophy. It is the branch of philosophy that concerns itself with right or wrong, and other issues related to evaluating human action. And you should always remember that Socrates was the first to systematize the discipline. He was the first to claim that the unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates devoted all his life to a critical examination of human behavior. He was the first to confess that the only thing I know is that I know nothing. In his opinion, ethics is also referred to as the science of human conduct. It is the philosophical study of the so-called moral facts, namely such things as moral evaluations, commandments, norms, virtuous acts, the manifestations of conscience, Brugger 117. It, in addition, a philosophical study of voluntary human action, with the purpose of determining what types of activity are good, right, and to be done, or bad, wrong, and to be avoided, so that humans may live well. Thus, ethics is the philosophical study of the activities that secure the good life for man. Its concern is with judgments of approval or disapproval, rightness or wrongness, goodness or badness, virtue or vice, desirability or otherwise of human actions or state of affairs. Idawu, 2010, 11. Ethics compare what you do and what you ought to do. Ethics is not primarily concerned with facts or the is, but rather with the ought. In other words, ethics is not interested in the ontic, but in the ontological question. Thus, the focus on the ought as primary mission is what differentiates ethics from other disciplines. You should also know that ethics is divided into descriptive, prescriptive, or normative, and meta-ethics. Descriptive ethics. The duty of descriptive ethics is to examine the moral views held by human beings or the society, and to confirm whether these views are universal or not. In Udoy Dem's words, the study of human actions centers on the description of how human beings behave or act without actually making value judgments or prescribing what human beings should or should not do. 1992, 70. Normative or prescriptive ethics. The main duty of normative ethics is to prescribe what ought to be both for humans and society. In other words, it prescribes that criteria for human actions properly be judged as morally good or bad. Meta-ethics. It is the part of ethics that deals with the logic and language of ethical concepts and terms. In other words, meta-ethics is mostly concerned with the elucidation or description and implication of ethical terms such as good, bad, right, wrong, ought, etc. It works hand in hand with normative ethics. As a normative discipline, ethics deals with questions such as, how do humans ought to behave? What is morality? What is the nature of moral responsibility? What is the definition of good? What is the chief goal for which all men should strive? Is it accumulation of wealth, or is it pleasure or happiness? Has man any final end? Is there any real difference between morally right and wrong actions? or is it merely a matter of feeling? What is the role of punishment? Are moral judgments on what we ought to do objective or subjective, or are they arbitrary? 4.0. Conclusion. The core branches of philosophy are logic, metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. These branches are characterized by their characteristics. If this is your first time of coming across our videos, why not do well to subscribe, like, comment, and share for others too to benefit. Unit 4. Philosophy and Other Disciplines Contents. 1.0. Introduction. Beside the 4 traditional branches of philosophy that you have learned above, there are other branches of philosophy which are often referred to as the philosophy of the infrastructure of disciplines. This study unit introduces you to the analysis of the relationship between philosophy and some other disciplines. Bearing in mind that there is no discipline per se that does not stem from philosophy as parent discipline. Unit 3. The focus in this unit will be specifically on the relationship between philosophy, the sciences, religion, education, and law. 2.0. Intended learning outcomes. By the end of this unit, you will be able to apply philosophical thoughts in analyzing the relationship between philosophy, science, religion, education, and law. 3.0. Main content. 3.1. Philosophy and science. You should bear in mind that until late 16th and early 19th centuries, all scientific knowledge was within the ambit of philosophical inquiry. In other words, philosophy was the science par excellence. But according to Archie J. Baum, as reflections upon problems became increasing, complex, and as special techniques were developed, specialists limited the range of these inquiries, and the sciences were born. Among the first were mechanics, mathematics, and astronomy. Among the latest were psychology and sociology. The romance of the maturing of these offspring of the fecund mother must be left to the history of science, 1995-10. The nature of scientific knowledge. Unlike philosophy, science is best known as an exact discipline. In line with this, the Oxford Advanced Dictionary also defines science as knowledge arranged in an orderly manner, especially knowledge obtained by observation and testing of facts. For Frolov, the nature of scientific knowledge goes beyond this positivist definition. According to him, science is also the field of research directed towards obtaining further knowledge of nature, society, and thought. Science is not limited to natural or exact sciences. Science is an integral system with its components flexibly correlated in history, study of nature, study of society, natural science, 1984, 372. There is no doubt that science stemmed from philosophy. It is also true that as a discipline, science bears some specific characteristics different from philosophy. According to Harold H. Titus, scientific knowledge can be defined as a system of man understands of nature, society, and thought. It reflects the world in concepts, categories, and laws whose truth is verified by practical experience. Science is the study of the totality of the concrete spheres of material reality. It is concerned to investigate and establish objective laws of nature by forming working hypotheses by which man may be enabled to harness nature to his purposes and transform his environment. 1997-65. From the above definition of science, it should be clear to you that the main purpose of science as discipline is to observe, understand natural phenomena, and then control processes. To any scientist, it is assumed that the universe, the orderly and natural phenomena, are predictable and lawful. Convergences and divergences between philosophy and science. Always remember that it is improper to consider philosophy and science as competitors. Even though science originated from philosophy as a discipline, their subject matter is different. The scientist's main business is to explain natural phenomena, while a philosopher does not intend to do so. An average scientist always seeks for explanation, while the philosopher basically seeks for justification. You should also know that the two main scientific purposes are prediction and control over phenomena. There are also 6 steps procedures in any scientific inquiry which one cannot avoid. These are observation, inductive generalization, hypothesis, attempted verification of hypothesis, proof or disproof, and knowledge. Thus, prediction and control based on the laws of induction are what makes science not only original but also different from philosophy. As academic disciplines, their methodologies are quite different. The philosopher's inquiry begins where that of the scientist stops. It may be difficult for a scientist to answer philosophical questions. Philosophy operates at a different level. A scientist cannot answer philosophical questions such as, is the world divided into mind and matter, or is it possessed of independent power? Is the mind subject to matter, or is it possessed of independent power? Has the universe any unity or purpose? Is it evolving towards some goal? Are there really laws of nature, or do we believe in them only because of our innate love of order? Does God exist? You can see that none of these questions can find answer in the scientist's laboratory. You should also bear in mind that even though the kind of knowledge that the scientist and philosopher seek is different, the purpose of their disciplines is often similar. Because both of them are motivated by sheer curiosity and the satisfaction of having knowledge of the universe purely for the pleasure of the understanding. 3.2 Philosophy and Religion. The purposes of philosophy and religion are fundamentally opposed. A philosopher is always critical, while a religionist is not. For a religionist, the role of reason is basically one of interpreting and defending the dogma derived from sources whose authority and truth is taken on faith. While any serious philosopher begins his investigations from a position of intellectual neutrality, regardless of where his personal sympathies may lie. In philosophy, any known assumption is subject to critical scrutiny, while religion is purely dogmatic. In religion, knowledge is sought principally to achieve what a given religion takes to be humankind's final happiness or destiny. While in philosophy, knowledge is sought simply for its own sake. Philosophy often questions the assumptions of religion. You should also know that the purposes of philosophy should not be confused with those of the religious minister, the theologians, the psychoanalyst, pastors, and imams. A philosopher is not a magician. Critical reasoning, neutrality, and the desire for knowledge for its own sake are the basic concerns of a philosopher. It is in this sense that philosophy is very different from religion. 3.3 Philosophy and Education. This minor branch of philosophy refers to the study of the fundamental principles of the theory of education, as distinguished from the science or art of education. That is, the empirical study of educational process and the techniques or methods of educational practice. For instance, to the pragmatists, the philosophy of education principally deals with values and goals of education, which include the nature of humans as capable of being educated, the agent by which education is achieved, the characteristics of a truly educated person, the trained abilities acquired in education, which help one to solve practical problems of life, and control of his environment. In this branch of philosophy, the philosopher examines the concept of education and what it means to educate and how best it can be achieved. He looks at stages involved in education and what the goals of ideal education are. 3.4 Philosophy and Law. The function philosophy performs in law is that it studies the nature of law and philosophical principles of law and justice, with reference to the origin and the end of the civil law and the principles that should govern its formulation. A critical and philosophical look at law in its generality is the function of a discipline called jurisprudence, which, as understood by lawyers, denote a working knowledge of a particular system of law with reference to the exercise of private and public decision-making functions, and scholarly critiques of the resulting actions. According to Pizzorni, there are three classifications of the main object of philosophy of law, and these are: 1. The universal concept of law, that is, its essential features which must be present in every juridical system. 2. The foundation of law from which every legal system derives its origin and values. 3. The standard or criteria with which all existing laws are guided and evaluated, for the problem of the evaluation of law is the problem of the philosophy of law. Curled from Omoregbe, 1994, 173. Philosophy of law differs from the science of law. While the science of law deepens man's knowledge of laws or legal system, The philosophy of law broadens man's horizon and opens the human mind to see that there is more to the reality of law and legal experience than can be seen through the empirical study of law. 4.0. Conclusion. Philosophy share relationship with other field of study such as science, religion, education, and law. Please do well to share it with others as well as on your study groups. If this is your first time of coming across our videos, why not do well to subscribe, like, comment, and share for others too to benefit. Unit 5. The Usefulness of Philosophy. 1.0. Introduction. This study is to introduce to you the usefulness of philosophy. It is an opportunity for you to know how useful philosophy is to humankind and the environment. The usefulness of philosophy as discussed here will enhance your understanding of philosophy as distinguished from those who conceive it as an abstract contemplation and romance with the unreal, far removed from practical living. 2.0. Intended learning outcome. By the end of this unit, you will be able to analyze philosophy in terms of its usefulness and concept. 3.0. Main content. The usefulness of philosophy. You need to know that those who conceive philosophy as an intellectually complex and as an abstract contemplation that is far removed from practical living do not see any meaningfulness or relevance in philosophical enterprise. However, philosophy is both mentally and practically relevant to humankind. One of the usefulness of philosophy is that it helps to foster or develop the habit of reflections, and thus further help us to enlarge the areas of our awareness to become more alive, more discerning, more critical, and to be more enlightened. The age in which we live is an age of uncertainty and change, when many of the older beliefs and the ways of doing things are inadequate. When this is the situation, we need a scale of values and a sense of direction. Philosophy provides this sense of direction. It provides us with a unity of outlook and response to the reality of the world in which we live and operate. It provides us with the parameters for discernment and for judging issues and articulating problems intelligently and critically. Philosophy in the intellectual realm trains one to think clearly, critically, and independently. Through philosophy, one can develop analytical abilities with which one can effectively handle both practical and abstract issues. At moral level, it helps to provide insight in distinguishing among values and to identify for oneself what is best and most relevant. It enables one to distinguish which human behavior is good, moral, acceptable, and praiseworthy, as against those that are bad, immoral, unacceptable, and condemnable. As a professional in any field, philosophy provides the intellectual background helpful to success. It challenges one to come up with one's own effective ways of solving problems that do not have ready-made answer. Furthermore, it helps in the rationalization and organization of results of human inquiry, religion, historical, and scientific into consistent view world. 4.0. Conclusion. Some persons hold the view that philosophy is an abstract and believe that philosophy has no practical relevance to humankind. But the usefulness of philosophy in the various field of study make the assertion to be untrue. Why not do well to subscribe, like, comment, and share for others too to benefit. Unit 6. Sources of Knowledge and Criteria for Knowing. 1.0. Introduction. This study unit introduces you to the different sources and criteria for knowing. It is an opportunity for you to differentiate between common sense and philosophical understanding of knowledge, belief, and opinion. The different sources of knowledge will be emphasized. 2.0 Intended learning outcomes. By the end of this unit, you will be able to differentiate between knowledge, opinion, and belief. Discuss the common sense and philosophical understanding of knowledge, opinion, and belief. Identify the different sources of knowledge. Discuss the criteria for knowledge. 3.0. Main content. 3.1. Difference between knowledge, opinion, and belief. Often the terms knowledge, opinion, and belief are used interchangeably, and when considered at the surface level, it ordinarily looks as if there is no difference among them. In the daily life, it is easy for someone to say he knows when he should say he believes. On the other hand, he believes when he should say he knows. It is important to know that, like philosophy, the question of knowledge is not an easy one. It is not easy to align our thoughts with reality. Our mind is always puzzled when it comes to adjusting our beliefs to the knowledge of things in the world, so that our beliefs become grounded in evidence. Therefore, the relationship and the difference between knowledge, opinion, and belief depend on the person's position. 3. 1.1. Common sense understanding of knowledge, opinion, and belief. As stated earlier, often knowledge, opinion, and belief are used interchangeably. This confusion mostly appears in common sense usage. To a layman, knowledge implies many things. For instance, knowledge can even be synonymous with acquaintance. When a layman asks a question such as, "Do you know the Vice Chancellor of the National Open University of Nigeria?" Or "For your university?" In his mind, this question is the same as, "Are you acquainted with the Vice Chancellor?" However, the truth is that you might know the Vice Chancellor in the sense of being acquainted with him without knowing much about him. On the other hand, it is also possible to know a great deal about some other person which you have never met. For instance, as a student of philosophy, you know a great deal about Plato, but I am sure that you never met him. Also, in daily life, some people say they know while they mean believe or think. For instance, when a layman says that a medicine is good, what he has in mind is think, because he might have some authoritative person saying it that medicine is good. Most of the time we hear people saying that they know that black men are cursed, nothing good can come out of them. They know that things will never work well for them. In the above statements, there is an obvious confusion between knowledge, opinion, and belief, and this is what happens in the daily life of a layman. 3. 1.2. Philosophical understanding of knowledge, opinion, and belief. The philosophical understanding of knowledge is very different from that of the layman. For a layman, knowledge, opinion, and belief are interwoven, but it is not possible in philosophy. For a philosopher, you say no when you possess information that is beyond doubt, and the information is also true. Philosophical knowledge follows the logic of proposition. That is, I know that, for example, I know that Nigeria is the most populated country in Africa. I know that Cameroon and Nigeria are neighbors. According to John Hospers, if we take the letter X to stand for any proposition, some requirements must be met in order for us to assert truly that we know X. X must be true. We must have evidence for X, that is, reason to believe S. Not only must X be true, we must believe that X is true. There must be no counter-evidence. Hospers adds that the moment you have some reasons to believe that a proposition is not true, this immediately negates a person's claim to know it. You cannot know S if X is not true. If I say I know S but X is not true, my statement is self-contradicting, for part of what is involved in knowing S is that S is true. 1956, 144. According to him, there may be numerous statements that you believe but do not know to be true, but there can be none, which you know to be true but don't believe. For believing is a defining characteristic of knowing. But believing is not a defining characteristic of X being true. X can be true even though neither he nor I nor anyone believes it. After all, the earth was round even before anyone believed that it was. 1956, 145. What matters here is that knowledge implies being sure, being certain. Also, believing is a precondition for knowledge. Because when you know something, you have a right to a certain confidence in your belief as a true and reliable guide to action. Thus, you cannot say you know something which you are not sure of, but it is possible to believe something you are not sure of. You can believe in the existence of God, yet you are not sure of his existence. There is no problem in a statement such as, I think that God exists, but I am not sure. But you cannot say, for instance, that I know he will come, but I am not sure. Knowledge is more qualitative than opinion and belief. An opinion or belief cannot be true unless it is grounded or supported with evidence. Evidence is the unique characteristic of knowledge. That is why customs and some hereditary matters are always at odds with knowledge. You should know that it is not because some customs, beliefs, or hereditary affairs are unquestionable that they are synonymous with knowledge. Some unquestionable beliefs are not well-founded or grounded in evidence. Therefore, they do not constitute knowledge. Always remember that the knower must not only be able to adduce enough evidence, but must also know that he knows his beliefs. For to know is to know that you know. It must be clear to you now that knowledge is quite different from opinion or belief. We have knowledge only when we can provide reasons and evidence for our claims. On the contrary, belief or opinion is based on inner, personal certainty and conviction. Knowledge is objective, that is, it must be communicable and verifiable. 3.2. Sources of knowledge. One of the perennial questions in the history of epistemology, that is, theory of knowledge, has always been, how does knowledge come about? How do we know propositions to be true? Or by what means do we come by our knowledge of the real world? Answers to these questions have been given through the following means: A. Reason, B. Sense experience, C. Authority, D. Intuition, E. Revelation, faith, and F. Mystical experience. 2.1. Reason. Rationalism is a school of thought in epistemology which holds that human beings can acquire knowledge of reality using our minds alone, by thinking or pure reason. To any rationalist, reason is a necessary ingredient for all our knowledge claims. This is one of the reasons why Aristotle defines man as a rational animal. Thus, the ability to think is what is called reason. Any serious rationalist agrees that we cannot acquire knowledge through sense experience without the powers of reason. For them, it is true that our perceptual experience provides the raw material for judgments, but without reason, we cannot make judgments at all. For instance, to reason that the object in front of you is a blackboard, you must first of all recognize it as a blackboard based on certain perceptual characteristics such as color, smell, taste, size, shape, as they recur in your experience. Then, by way of abstraction, you can recognize a blackboard when there is a combination of these characteristics. To the rationalist, therefore, reason is the prima matrix of human knowledge, and with it alone the certainty of human knowledge is guaranteed. Ayer, 1956-54. Prominent members of this school of thought are Leibniz, Spinoza, and René Descartes. 2.2. Sense experience. Sense experience is another source of knowledge. The empiricists are the proponents of sense experience theory. To any empiricist, as far as knowledge is concerned, only sense experience matters. In other words, empiricism is the philosophical theory which denies reason, while insisting that experience is always the necessary ingredient in our knowledge claims of the natural world. This school of thought or group have Bishop George Berkeley, who asserted esse est percipii, meaning to be is to be perceived. His position simply implies that what that is known, true and real, is that which satisfies the sense experience condition. Other prominent members are John Locke and David Hume. 2.3. Authority. Authority is also considered as one of the sources of knowledge. Authority as source of knowledge occurs when we make certain claims to knowledge based on the authority of someone who is a specialist in the particular field of knowledge. Magister dixit, that is, the master said. For instance, I know HIV is real because Prof. Isaac Adewole, the Minister of Health in Nigeria, said so. Here, Prof. Isaac Adewole becomes an authority on the subject. But you should always remember that even as a source of knowledge, authority is a relative term. A man may be an authority in a certain field of knowledge like the minister, however. This does not confer certainty on the claim being made, even if he claims some knowledge of it. Aside, it is fallacious to reason this way. 2.4. Intuition. Another source of knowledge is intuition. Baum defines intuition as the immediacy of apprehension, 1995-5. According to him, intuition is the name we give to the way awareness apprehends when awareness apprehends appearance directly. No intuiting exists apart from awareness. No awareness exists without intuiting, 1995-5. That is why you sometimes hear people say, I have a sense of intuition. I know by intuition that President Muhammadu Buhari will contest in 2019. 2.5. Revelation and faith. These are also considered as sources of knowledge. It is common to hear people saying, it was revealed to me in a dream, or it was revealed to me by God and I have faith in it. My faith guides me in this matter and I know that it is certainly true. 4.0. Conclusion. This study unit dealt with different sources of knowledge and their criteria for knowing. It also emphasized the common sense and philosophical understanding of knowledge, belief, and opinion. Discussion forum. 1. In your context, state and explain three main relationships between philosophy and academic discipline. 2. Philosophy is often regarded as an abstract course. In not more than 250 words, justify this statement. 3. Using your context, state two philosophical thoughts and explain why they are philosophical. 4. Post your answers on the discussion forum. 5. Read the posts of two other persons and write you comment on each from philosophical view.